Roland Gutierrez. He is a Democrat who represents the 19th District of Texas. His district includes Uvalde, where the shooting was today. He was briefed by the Texas Ranger on what happened and has been the source for a lot of the most current knowledge we have. First, let me just say, State Senator, our most profound condolences to the people that you represent, and thank you for joining me. How are things there right now?
So, Chris, this is a pretty sad day for folks in Uvalde and Texas and really in the United States. I mean, I'm just devastated about this. And I found out at 1 p.m. today that, one child had been killed. And throughout the day, that number increased from 9 to 14. And then ultimately, I was briefed at 5:35 that there was 18 children and 3 adults. As I've arrived here in Uvalde this evening and spoken to some of my constituents, it's just earth-shattering that you would take your children to school and not be able to pick them up. I think that people around the United States need to just grasp that for a minute. I'm a father of 2 little girls, and I can't imagine that happening. I can't conceptualize it. But unfortunately, 18 families here are having to grapple with that very thing.
Can you tell us a little bit for people that have, before tonight, don't know your town's name? They're seeing it now in these awful circumstances. Just tell us about the town of Uvalde, Texas, and the people that live there and the folks that you represent.
Uvalde is a very nice, picturesque community, hardworking families. It's got a lot of history in Texas. John Nance Garner was from Uvalde, the vice president under Lyndon Johnson. It's a very, very hardworking community. Never in my right mind did I think I'd be sitting here talking to you about this issue. But again, that's where we are. People are just trying to grasp their minds on around this. It's just very, very difficult for folks right now.
I want to talk a little bit about the information that we know. First of all, do you know if the relevant families know the status right now? Are there families that you represent that are there that are still searching for information, or have folks been notified about their children and loved ones?
So on my way over, I spoke to some friends of mine who, unfortunately, his cousin had lost a child. They didn't lose a child. That child is in the hospital right now. And so they're having to deal with all of that. There are still families that I imagine don't know the situation. I'll be over at the Civic Center here in a moment. And to talk to the county judge, to talk to the superintendent of the schools. My hope today is to try to grasp what kind of resources are going to be needed over the course of the next several days. It's a small community with very little psychological care. And I've talked to school districts in San Antonio, and they're going to be sending bereavement teams.
You were the source for some of the information that we have, that it was 18 children and 2 adults, as well as the gunman, that you had gotten that from a Texas Ranger. Is there any other information that you have come into about what happened?
So I have yet to get a subsequent briefing since my 5:30 briefing with the Texas Rangers. All we know is that he went over to he lived with his grandmother, shot her. As of 5:30, she was still living. She has been airlifted over to San Antonio. From that incident, he drove over, got in an accident near the school, and proceeded to run into the school and continue with this act of carnage. And that's about as much as I do. And to the extent that the Rangers were able to uncover that he purchased those weapons on his 18th birthday a few days ago. It was the first thing that he did. And he purchased those weapons legally at a brick and mortar facility here in Uvalde. It's astounding to me. But unfortunately, in Texas, instead of doing things to limit access, we have been expanding those issues in the legislative process. We have to start looking at this as a real problem, not just in Texas, but across the United States, and figure out how we're going to keep these militarized weapons away from young men like this.
Do you think that you have colleagues across the aisle who share that feeling, particularly as I spoke to one of your colleagues, Jasmine Crockett, earlier, that in the wake of that shooting in El Paso, in a community that was decimated there, of course, by what happened, that the legislature, the one piece of gun legislation it took up was to expand access to make it possible for anyone over age 21, I believe, to open carry in your state?
No, I mean, absolutely. And those are the challenges that we have, Chris. But, you know, we have to keep fighting this fight for common sense gun laws. I'm a gun owner. I get it. I get what my constituents in West Texas want. My district starts in San Antonio and goes all the way to Big Bend National Park. And so I understand what people's desires are in that space. Yeah. But even the most ardent gun owners will tell you that we need to do something about having these restricting some access of these militarized weapons. I would argue that there is a vast difference between these types of weapons that are being used in these types of shootings to the types of weapons that my constituents are using out on the gun range or while hunting here in Texas.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. State Senator, I know you must have a lot to do tonight, and I don't want to keep you too long speaking to us, but I really appreciate you taking time. And please know that obviously the entire nation is thinking about the folks that you represent in that town there. And I know the president called Greg Abbott today to offer anything the U.S. government can do, but I think that's broadly the case of everyone watching across lines of ideology or the political spectrum, that we have you in our hearts tonight. Thank you very much.